Climate Change Planning. Thanks everyone for joining this fourth meeting of the Clark County Climate Change Planning Community Advisory Group meeting. We're just going to look at the microphones and we'll be back in just a second. All right, we're hoping this works. And I think it does. Okay, we're going to keep going again with this fourth meeting of the Community Advisory Group for the Clark County Climate Change Planning effort. So thanks everyone for being here. I'm Sylvia Tubrowski and I'll help to facilitate today's meeting. If you go to the next slide, and next slide, just want to remind everyone of the project team that we have here on the next slide. So we have Clark County staff in the room and as well as the consultant team, and we'll all just go ahead and introduce ourselves when we get to different portions of today's agenda. And if we go to the next slide, I'll do a review of why we're here today in our agenda. So if you remember at our last Community Advisory Group meeting, you all helped to finalize a draft vision statement that will kind of guide our work moving forward, that we'll again revisit towards the end of the process. And another big piece that you all did was to provide input and kind of do a brainstorming session to think about goals for the resilience element of the comp plan. And so today we want to keep talking about resilience and really dive into the goals and policies for that. So we'll have some time today to review some draft goals and policies for resilience and just kind of keep talking about that. And that'll be a focus of the meeting for today and for the next couple of Community Advisory Group meetings as well. And you'll also get an update on what the Environmental Justice Coalition is doing and their development of an equity lens to guide the work. If you go to the next slide, we have the agenda for how we'll get through all of that today. So we'll have some brief project updates and then that update on the Environmental Justice Coalition and equity lens. And then Dana and her team will give a little bit of an update on the resilience goals and remind you all about kind of what we heard last time from you and how we're moving forward. And then we're really going to just have a short break and then really devote most of today's meeting on talking about those resilience goals and policies. We will have 10 minutes towards the end of today's meeting for public comment as well, and then we'll just have some wrap up and next steps. All right, next slide. All right, so just some reminders for our participation here today. You should have all gotten a meeting packet in advance with the agenda and a reminder of kind of what we did last time and some of the key themes from that resilience goals brainstorming conversation. So that'll be useful for today's meeting. And if you're joined by webinar, just some reminders. You should be joined as a panelist, and if you're not, then please just send a Zoom chat to Maria Verano and she can help with that. And members of the public, you should be joined here as attendees. Just a reminder to stay on mute when you're not speaking and then join on video if you're able to. When we get to discussion portions, you can just press the raise hand button to get in the queue. And if you're joined by phone only, you can press *9. And if you're in the room, you can just kind of do this with your tent card and we can see that your hand is raised that way. And please do say your name and affiliation before you're speaking. It especially really helps if you're in the room because folks online can't necessarily tell who's speaking here. And just move around, take care of yourself as needed. If you're here in the room, we have sandwiches in the back, 4 different kinds, so help yourself to that. Restrooms are here, and take 2 left, and you'll get to the restrooms. There's water in the back as well. And a reminder that this meeting is being recorded. Go to the next slide. This is a reminder of where to find the raise hand button. It's just kind of towards the bottom of the platform. And if you need closed captioning, you'll find a CC button at the bottom of the screen as well. You can just turn that on for yourself if you need it. Next slide. Just some discussion guidelines. We went through these at our last few meetings, but just want to remind everyone maybe of some of the key pieces here. We're at a point in the process where we really want your ideas and concerns brought in as early as possible. So especially today, we're talking about goals and policies, and we will continue to have this conversation, but the earlier you can bring up your ideas there, the better. We also hope that you can address issues and questions, really focus on the substance of what's being discussed here. And we really hope that you'll seek to learn and understand each other's perspectives. If you're in the room, you'll notice that we shuffled around the tent cards so that hopefully you're sitting next to people that you may not have sat next to before, and that's really so that we hope you have those conversations with other folks in the room. And just a reminder to speak with respect, listen with respect. And for the chat in the platform, we ask that if you're a CAG member, to really just try to raise your hand and bring your voice into the conversation and not use the chat for substantive comments. If you do need to use the chat, though, please remember to select the option to send the chat to everyone so that everyone sees it and it can become part of the public record. Next slide. All right, so public participation, we will have public participation towards the end of today's meeting. I'm not going to ask for who needs to make a public comment at this time, but just that'll happen at around 8:10. And so we'll just address that when we get there. We usually have about 2 minutes per person that wants to make a comment. If you are not able to make your comments today or you prefer to provide them in writing, you can send an email to comp.plan@clark.wa.gov to submit your comment. And there's also a link to submit a comment online at clark.wa.gov/community-planning/comp-plan-comments. And we'll put that in the chat too. Okay, next slide. I'm almost done with these introductory pieces. Just old business, we sent out a meeting summary from the Community Advisory Group meeting number 3, so hopefully you received that. And I'll just open it up here to see if anyone had any red flags, concerns about that summary. Yes, no, and a reminder to say your name as well. Oh, and microphone.
I took a few notes just on when you got down to the brainstorm part. Are we commenting on that right now? Okay. So I went through the Post-its that were, the actual images of the Post-its, and then just looking at the summaries, I felt like there were a few things that were de-emphasized that I felt like were important. And so in particular, just looking at the affordability issue was mentioned in one category, I think in the zoning and development affordability issue was there, but I saw it in other places as well, and so I wanted to flag that for us. Also, just looking at the cost benefit of, as we're developing policies, are we getting the most out of those policies that we possibly can get without pushing things further out of reach for people? So that equity piece just being so important. And then also I felt like alternative energy sources was kind of de-emphasized a bit. And I think what else? I personally put in a comment about, access to natural resources and our mineral resources. I think that's super important when we're thinking about recycling, when we're thinking about batteries. We can't recycle or have batteries if we don't know where our mineral resources are and how to manage those properly. So those were things that jumped out at me.
All right, we can take another look at the summary. Would you mind, if you have specific parts in the summary, providing that in writing so that we can see exactly where those pieces are? We captured that as well here, but that, if you have some notes, that would be helpful too.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, anyone else? Yes, Justin. And just a reminder to say your name so that folks on the line know who's speaking.
Of course, Justin Wood here, making the comment. Saw on the summary zoning and development plan for infill dense development, and then in parentheses, rather than expanding the urban growth boundary. I could have been mistaken, but didn't remember seeing that on the post-its. Could have been there. Just some concerns with that, I guess, running afoul of another goal here in zoning and development, promoting affordable housing options. So when we've filled in all of our infill, when we've densified as much as we can, that would lead to increased housing costs if we're really just continuing to stay in the current urban growth boundary. So if needed, I think maybe some language there, and I can also give some written language to the group as well.
Okay, thanks, Justin. And just to clarify, are you making a comment that something is missing that should have been there, or just kind of concern about the comments that were made?
Total agreement with all the language except the language in the parentheses on zoning and development.
Okay, thank you. And Nick?
I'm going to just echo what Justin just said. I'm also concerned about those parens and agree with his comments too.
All right, thank you. And Dawn?
This is Don Steinke, Sierra Club, Climate Action of Southwest Washington, and the Alliance for Community Engagement. One thing to keep in mind about affordability is it's not just the upfront affordability, it's the associated cost that comes with, for example, if you have density, you might not need to own a car. And if you live farther out, expand the urban growth boundaries, then you need to own a car, or two or three cars, depending. And so I just want to add that. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. Appreciate that. And we can get into all of those substantive comments when we get into the discussion later on today. And I see a hand up from Monica as well. Go ahead, Monica.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Don was saying, but then you just answered that we can get more into the weeds and talk more about that. But I also want to say that we're and I'm sorry if it's going now, but I hope that we all see that what we take from our Mother Earth, like we need to give back to her. And we also, Mother Earth never asked for rent, but those are just my comments for right now. But thank you.
Thanks, Monica. All right, and just a reminder, at this point, we really are just trying to finalize meeting summary number 3. I'll go to Andrea. Do you have a comment on that meeting summary?
No, I have an overall concern, but I can wait until we get to that.
Yeah, perfect. We have plenty of time for other conversation later today, so thanks for waiting, Andrea. Okay, is this on the meeting summary? Okay, go ahead, Nick.
Is this going to become a matter of record? Okay.
Yes, the meeting summary will get posted online.
We don't skip over our comments because those were done, so I just want to make sure that if with the approval of the meeting summary, I don't know what it is about putting our comments into that meeting summary. I just want to make sure they occur in there for a matter of record. Yeah,
correct. We'll update the meeting summary. It's really important to make sure that it reflects what everyone thinks happened at that meeting. So that's the purpose of this conversation right now, is if something's missing, something was written incorrectly or didn't reflect what happened, that's kind of where we're trying to get to. So we'll make those updates and send it back out again. Okay, with that, I am going to hand it over to Jenna for some project updates, and especially an update on what the Environmental Justice Coalition has been doing. Hand it over to Jenna.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Okay, so I'm going to start with a list of my miscellaneous updates, and then we'll get into some updates on the Environmental Justice Coalition and Equity Lens. And I'm sounding a little bit echoey. One moment. Further away. Okay, is that better? Let's try this. Okay, so just wanted to note in your meeting packet again that we are starting to include communications that you all send to us in between meetings so that you can all see that. And similarly, any public comments that we've received in writing since the last meeting. So those are part of your meeting materials. I also keep forgetting to mention in the meeting that I have printed copies of House Bill 1181, the Commerce Guidance, the menu of measures. So if any of you want printed copies, let me know. I've got some with me today. I can also mail them to you if you are not in the room today and would like copies. Okay, I also wanted to mention Thilo Kluth, who was in the position in this group representing freight interests. He has stepped down due to scheduling interests, so you may have seen a news release go out there's now a vacancy for the freight position in this group. Applications are due by 5 p.m. on June 6th. You're welcome to forward that news release to anyone you know who has some freight expertise who might be interested in applying to join this group. Let's see, we gave an update to the Planning Commission on May 16th, and we have another follow-up session with them on June 20th. These are just informational sessions to keep them up to speed on where we're at with the project, but you're welcome to listen into those. There isn't a really role to comment, but you can listen in if you're curious or want to see or hear what types of questions they're asking. And then similarly, we have a work session scheduled with the County Council on June 5th to give them an update on the project and also get their guidance before we get too far along with goal and policy development for the resilience work. So that's what that check-in with them will be about. Again, there's not really public comment, but you're welcome to listen in to the council meeting. Okay, let's see. In terms of some general public engagement going on with this project, our severe weather survey has closed, so we've got several hundred responses that we are starting to look at. So I think we need a few more weeks to actually comb through it and be able to summarize for you all what we heard from other folks in the community regarding impacts to severe weather events. So we'll share more with you all once we have time to finish that summary. And then similarly, our Environmental Justice Coalition members are starting their engagement activities. So a lot of them are asking similar questions to members of their communities. So we have even more feedback coming in as well. So I'm hoping by June, July meeting, we should have more significant summary to share back with you all on that feedback we're hearing. We are also planning to hold a community workshop on it's a Saturday, June 22nd in the morning. And so that would be a workshop for anyone in the community to give us some feedback on goal and policy ideas related to resilience. So that's our next community engagement activity. And then whatever we hear from that, we'll also share back with you all to consider. Let's see. Okay, a few more things. There's a lot going on right now with the comprehensive plan. So outside of this climate-specific project, the general comprehensive plan has some open houses on May 28th, 29th, and 30th. And those open houses are to help scope the environmental impact statement for the whole comprehensive plan update. So you all are welcome to attend. There's also an online version of that open house. So you may have seen a news release go out about that as well. Okay, and then finally, I wanted to just mention, we've gotten a suggestion from someone in this group on maybe trying to have a meeting or two in the near future where we encourage as many people to come in person, it's just a little bit awkward, right, with a hybrid meeting and how well you can tell who's speaking and things like that. So We wanted to suggest, if you are able to attend the June meeting in person, that might be a good one, because I think there's going to be a lot of discussion. And so that would be a good one to come in person. So if you're able, we encourage you to do that. We know that may not work with everyone's schedules, but recommend the next meeting be one that folks try to come in person if they can. Okay, so I think I'll pause there. Or am I supposed to keep going? Sylvia, it's the next topic. Okay. Any questions for anything I just shared?
Yeah, Nick, go ahead.
Nick Massey, I was a little bit, how do I put this in words? I took the survey, and it felt like people don't like to live in the Pacific Northwest there. I mean, I just want to bring up that the reason I live in the Pacific Northwest is the beautiful weather, the rain that happens here, all the good stuff that happens here too. So I don't want us to get so zoned in on all the bad things that are happening around here that we forget about the good things and the reasons why we live in Clark County in Southwest Washington. And so I just want to make that comment.
Thanks, Nick. And I see hands up online from Monica and Anne. So Monica, go ahead.
Hi, I didn't know if this was a good time to share the event that I'm putting on this Saturday, or is there a better time to share that for the EJC?
Yeah, I think that's great.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so here's the flyer that I made up. It's also in Spanish and Chuukese, because the event will be translated in Spanish and Chuukese. It's the Collaboration, Connection, and Caring event. And it's at the Fourth Plane Forward Commons from 11 a.m. until 3 p.m. this Saturday. And there's also other dates. So May 25th is the first one, July 20th is the second one, and September 7th is the third one. And they're all the same activities, but the activities, the first one's going to be the Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Healing Circle, where we get together, we talk about our lived experiences, we talk about what makes us go, ah, we talk about what makes us laugh, we talk about what makes us human, and then we talk about the false belief of hierarchy of human value and how we're all one family. And so we get past this hierarchy and we come in as a one to try to, create something for all of us to thrive. The next event is the Introduction to Donut Economics, where every human being can thrive within the means of our planetary boundaries. We just need to be regenerative by design and distributive by design and not focus on never-ending GDP growth. And then the next one is an event where the activity is Create Through Art, where I'm going to have paint, paintbrushes, markers, crayons, colored pencils, chalk, for you to draw what you want to see in our community. I am not an artist, but I know some people are, and that's how some people communicate with each other. So they'll have an option of that, or they have the option of doing the survey, which if they do the survey and they show me, then there'll be like an hour for people to complete it. But whoever completes it will be entered into a drawing, and there will be 3 winners of $50 gift cards to a Visa gift card to wherever they want to go. So an incentive to do the survey. And then there will also be free food throughout the whole event. And then during the art and survey time, there's going to be a little dance area with music and dancing. And I just got my light. So it's going to be a really fun, jam-packed event. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Monica. And Jenna will be sharing a little bit later that Environmental Justice Coalition members are going out into the community to get input. So thanks for sharing that example of some of the events that are being put on. And I'll go to Ann Foster.
Yes, Ann Foster. Just want to, in the first place, echo what Brent, I believe, just said about living where we live and appreciating all the positiveness about where we live. Second of all, we should all go to Monica's event this weekend. Third is a question. Jenna, you had mentioned a June 22nd open house. What do you perceive that looking like at this point?
Yeah, so the June 22nd event is intended as a community member workshop, so an opportunity for anyone interested in the public in giving us feedback on this project on resilience goals and policies. So you all have the opportunity to be part of an advisory group, right? But there's a lot of other people interested in this topic, so this is an opportunity for other folks to show up. We'll give them an update on where we're at with the project. We'll summarize some of the climate impact data and then get their feedback on goals and policies. So we've got, we'll give a report out. We'll have a guest speaker give some highlights of what the data says and maybe some examples of what other places have done. And then we'll have some opportunity for discussion to provide feedback. So that's what that event is about. And then we'll share back what we hear with you all to consider as well.
Okay. What time of day is it?
It's going to be 9 to 11 a.m. and we almost have a location figured out, but I don't have that confirmed quite yet.
Okay. And one final question. What's the date of the next CAG meeting?
That's a good question. It is
The 22nd?
June 26th. So it'll be the Wednesday after that event. I'm sorry,
Okay.
I'm causing the echo, so I'm going to turn my mic off.
Oh, sorry.
And we
I
can
hear the
follow
echo.
up with an email. We can follow up by email with these dates and all the information so that folks don't have to scramble and write it down. Right. And Nick?
Just a comment, are all of us going to be able to share our events that are going on too, or what are the rules of this committee?
So Monica was sharing an event from the Environmental Justice Coalition, and Jen is going to go into a little bit more on that as well, but those are events that are geared towards getting input for the climate element of the project that the Environmental Justice Coalition is kind of going out to seek. So that's why she's sharing that information there. No problem. Okay, any other questions about the other updates that Jenna shared? Okay, then I'll turn it back to you for an update on the Environmental Justice Coalition and the equity lens.
All right. So yeah, want to give you all some updates on what one of our other advisory group has been up to, our Environmental Justice Coalition. As you know, Monica was sharing one event that she's been working on, and but we've got 15 organizations in that group who are planning engagement with members of their community. And so there's a handful of events have happened so far, but there are many happening during the month of May as the group is getting started with their engagement. So right now, everyone's fairly focused on resilience and asking questions similar to what we put in our survey or variations of those questions that they've come up with themselves. And so, yeah, we're just starting to see some of the feedback come back. So hope to be able to summarize that and share that back with all of you so that you can hear what we are hearing from those outreach events as well. So that's generally what's going on with that group. But I also wanted to spend a few minutes talking about the equity lens for this project that we have our Environmental Justice Coalition helping us develop. So I wanted to give you, it will be one of several criteria that we need to consider in development of this policy list. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, so I just want to recap why equity basically has to be part of this project. So I'm going to start with just highlighting some things in the legislation that's behind this project and what it says regarding equity and this climate element. So the new climate change and resilience goal in the Growth Management Act has language saying that we need to ensure comprehensive plans advance environmental justice. And then if you look in the legislation when it's describing this, this new climate change and resiliency element, it says we must avoid creating or worsening localized climate impacts to vulnerable populations and overburdened communities. If you look in the greenhouse gas subelement section, it talks about we must identify actions that will prioritize greenhouse gas reductions that benefit overburdened communities in order to maximize the co-benefits of reduced air pollution and environmental justice. And then if you look in the resilience subelement section, it talks about we must include goals, policies, and programs designed to identify, protect, and enhance community resiliency to climate change impacts, including social, economic, and built environment factors that support adaptation to climate impacts consistent with environmental justice. So I'm highlighting these sections because, to me, I mean, this legislation is saying you have to do this. This is not an optional task. It's saying, hey, county, you have to do this. And then the legislation also includes definitions for environmental justice, overburdened community, and vulnerable populations, which we have on the next slide. I'm not going to read them entirely, but if you can go to the next slide. So the definition of environmental justice, that's now part of the Growth Management Act, talks about the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. And it goes on to talk about addressing disproportionate environmental and health impacts. So we've got definition for environmental justice. We'll share these slides out afterwards, just want to make sure you all have this for reference. There's also a definition for overburdened communities, which are defined as geographic areas where vulnerable populations face combined multiple A geographic area where vulnerable populations face combined multiple environmental harms and health impacts. And then if we can go to the next slide, there's actually two definitions for vulnerable populations. One focuses on population groups at higher risk for poor health outcomes in response to environmental harms. And then the second definition talks about vulnerable populations, including but not limited to racial or ethnic minorities, low-income populations, and populations disproportionately impacted by environmental harms. So these are the definitions that we are working with because these are the definitions that the law is telling us we need to refer to. So again, this is just, I know we talked about this several meetings ago, but just want to remind everyone why this is just a big part of this project, and that just highlight, like, the Growth Management Act has never defined these terms, right? This is very new for this, for planning and comprehensive planning and putting these equity terms into it. So just want to remind everyone of that. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so that's what the legislation says. And then in terms of how we are trying to take these ideas that the legislation says we have to do, our sort of two key tools for doing this is, one is we've formed an environmental justice coalition because they are helping us meaningfully involve people in our community who are at higher risk to climate impacts, right? We strongly believe they're going to be more effective reaching and connecting with people than I would be reaching out to people who maybe have a really different background than myself. So our process approach and having that group help us is one of our ways to try to meaningfully involve people who might not otherwise participate in a process like this. And one of the other key tools that we're trying to use is to come up with, we're calling it an equity lens. You could also think of it as like an environmental justice assessment tool, right? Some sort of tool that we can use to help evaluate policy ideas that we are considering. And so the Environmental Justice Coalition, we've started working with them to try to figure out what might this look like. So I just wanted to walk through the process on where it's going to show up. So, so far, we've been working with you all in the CAG to consider information, and as public input, as we hear it, it's being shared with you, and as we get feedback from the Environmental Justice Coalition, it also is being shared with you. And eventually, you all are going to make some sort of initial recommendation. We're hoping, and we're going to do this for resilience, and we're going to do it again then for the greenhouse gas reduction stuff. So in the next couple of months, we hope to have like a tentative list of goals and policies. And at that time, The Environmental Justice Coalition will review them more closely, and our project team also is going to use this equity lens to help evaluate those policies further. We'll also consider some other criteria, but equity will be one of them. Once we do that evaluation process, we'll share the results back with you all, and there'll be an opportunity to reconsider, revise, add policies, drop policies, you know, off the list before finalizing your recommendation at the end of this process. And then at that point, that's the recommendation that will move forward to the Planning Commission and then to the County Council to make a decision. Okay, so just wanted to flag where this is going to show up in the process. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So at the last EJC meeting, we started talking about what this equity lens might look like. And so on this slide, these are fairly generic questions that if you look across equity lenses in a lot of other places, local government, state government, federal government, or EJ tools, they tend to have questions along these lines. So we just shared these as a starting point with the EJC. They gave us some feedback. So for instance, when considering who's most impacted by an issue or decision, they wanted to make sure we included financial considerations, which weren't in the list that we have on the slide. And so they gave us quite a bit of other feedback too. So we're revising off of this, but just wanted to share that this is our starting point, and we're going to do a few rounds of iteration before we have what the lens is going to be that we're going to use to evaluate policies later on. Okay, so that's my update, but glad to take some questions.
All right, I'll go to Dawn and then to Noel. Noel, go ahead, Dawn.
Just a comment on the definition of vulnerable populations. Maybe people that are exposed, have increased exposure to air pollution would make them vulnerable. And according to the Washington State Health Disparities Map, in Clark County, pretty much everything inside the city limits of Vancouver is 8, 9, or 10, with 10 being the worst. It seems to be proximity to freeways that is the greatest source of pollution. And I'm thinking that who's on the freeways is people driving through to get to their places where there's less pollution. And that might be something to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thanks, Dawn.
I was just going to say, I appreciate this conversation tonight and kind of the refocusing on this policy level conversation. As I was reviewing a lot of the materials and comments and stuff, I felt like it was getting really more in the tactical level, and I think the reminder that we're working on policy level is really important.
Yes, well said, and that's going to be a reminder that we keep bringing up later today, so I'm glad that you brought that up today too. Right. Any other questions or comments on the equity lens conversation? All right, well, let's get into our next big topic then. So we're going to get into talking about the resilience goals and policies. So I'm going to hand it over to Dana in just a second. And so just a reminder that at our last meeting, you all brainstormed again some goals for the resilience element. And I think you brought in 200 plus comments between that meeting and after the meeting. And so Dana and her team have done a lot of work with that. She's going to share back kind of some of the key themes that we heard, which we understand we might not have gotten totally right, but hopefully, you know, you'll continue to tell us how to get those right throughout today's conversation. And Dana will also share kind of the process for developing the resilience goals and policies. And then after a break, we're going to get into diving in and really looking at that first draft of goals and policies and having a conversation about them. I'll hand it over to Dana.
Thank you, Sylvia. Next slide, please. So yeah, these are just high-level themes to kind of reflect back to you all what we heard from you in our last CAG meeting. So these are not the goal and policy list. Don't worry, we have more detailed stuff to show you in a little bit, but I just wanted to reflect back what we heard, some big themes within the 11 Department of Commerce sectors that we've asked you to kind of think within. So for agriculture and food systems, we're seeing that you're interested in directions like protecting livestock food production, protecting and promoting local food distribution and access to healthy foods, encouraging heat and drought-resistant crops. For buildings and energy, you've brought up topics like promoting renewables, innovative and green energy sources as well, definitely making sure that Clark County's energy grid is resilient in the event of severe weather. And this idea of access to heating and cooling, especially passive cooling, came up as something of interest. For cultural resources, we heard that you'd like to maintain community connections, really all the time, but particularly after a climate disaster, making sure that community members are able to come back together and reconnect, preserving culturally important sites. And also, we had several suggestions about native plant species and just making sure that we're protecting and prioritizing native plants. For economic development, folks were interested in having business owners be really more prepared for extreme weather and disasters and, more able to reopen and continue business. We have suggestions for providing jobs close to housing and this idea of a circular economy. So that just means, an economic system where we are focused on reusing materials, reducing consumption of new products, and reducing waste overall. Next slide, please. For ecosystems, we heard an interest in preserving open space across the county, both urban and rural open space, real desire to keep air and water clean, free of pollution, and maintaining ecosystem connectivity. We had probably the most feedback, I think, on the next two sectors, emergency management and health and well-being. You all have a lot of great ideas here. For emergency management, this idea came up about shelter access, access to resources, and really targeting emergency response to vulnerable populations and isolated groups who might normally not receive the focus of emergency management responses. A strong interest in promoting self-reliance and community capacity, so shoring up communities' ability to do a little bit of kind of self-protection and response during an extreme weather event. And then we heard requests for the county to have different emergency plans for specific climate hazards, so for example, heat plan. And health and well-being, again, this idea of having access to supportive services is important across the board at all times, but this can be really critical during and after emergencies, so making sure that things like childcare and healthcare are available to folks. Again, fostering access to healthy food and as well as exercise, and making sure that community members really understand where risks exist and what they can do to protect themselves. And then for transportation, we definitely got a lot of suggestions for multimodal, diverse transportation systems, so pedestrian routes, rail, bicycle lanes, and basically building resilience of local roadways so that they can better withstand climate stressors and hopefully doing so in a way that reduces emissions. Next slide, please. And then last three here for waste management, we certainly hear that there's an interest in supporting recycling and reusing materials in different and creative ways, and also coming up with ways to make it easier to dispose of vegetative debris. Again, all the time, but this is really relevant after, maybe a big storm or a severe weather event where there's a lot of vegetative debris on the ground. For water management, folks are interested in providing healthy and reliable drinking water and also making sure that our stormwater infrastructure is actually able to keep up with rainfall, current levels of rainfall, and also these higher, more extreme rainfall events that are projected to happen in the county over the next few decades. And lastly, zoning and development, which I know we've already touched on a little bit today here, but we had some suggestions for things like infill development, thinking about density and development, how to provide amenities really close to housing so that folks can walk or take transit and don't need to drive, and of course, focusing on affordable housing options and how that fits into that picture. Next slide, please. Okay, so that was just a recap to reflect back. We're going to get into more detailed goals and policies that have sprung out of that initial conversation shortly here. But this graphic should look familiar to you from last month. We're currently at this, the step with the star on it, discuss draft goals and policies. So after the last CAG meeting, we came out of that with those goals that I just summarized for you. We took those theme summary slides that I just shared to the EJC as a way to share with them what we had heard from the CAG. The EJC then reviewed those, expanded on the CAG goals, and provided their own input. So behind the scenes then for the last few weeks, the CAPA team has been working on matching your goals and the EJC's goals to both existing policies and thinking about maybe some new policies that we might try to apply if there isn't really a satisfactory existing policy. So my colleague Zach here will talk about that in just a minute and how we approached that to get to where we are today, ready to discuss a first draft of goals and policies. And from here, we're just going to keep this iterative process going. So CAPA is going to make revisions to the goal and policy list based on what we hear from you today. We're going to take it back to the EJC, have it reviewed with equity criteria in mind, at least for a preliminary pass, and then we're all going to keep working on this idea of prioritization and how to incorporate feedback from all the different stakeholder groups, community engagement events, and technical and county staff input. So with that, I will turn it over to Jenna. Next slide.
Okay, so before we go further, I was asked to talk a little bit about setting some expectations around setting like goals and policies for a comprehensive plan, because some people may be familiar, some of you have maybe read a comprehensive plan before, some of you maybe haven't before. So I want to just talk in general about comprehensive plan goals and policies. And well, I'm going to go through my list here and I'll make some more comments about that. So the first thing though I wanted to talk about is we have a very rough target of no more than 35 resilience policies, but that is it's not a hard number, and that is because, for the practical reason that we only have so much budget to do the additional analysis once we have a draft policy list. Our guidance document, we have to analyze in several different areas. So we're aiming for 35-ish. If we have a little bit more, a few more, it's okay. If we have a lot more, we probably would do less analysis of those. You know, we would evaluate them in less ways if we had a longer list. So I'm just throwing that out there as that is generally what we have in mind for, and this is just resilience. We're going to end up with an additional list of greenhouse gas reduction policies. Okay, so, and then we'll have another batch of policies for greenhouse gas reduction, probably a similar-ish number. So we're aiming for, again, this is like, it's not hard, a hard limit, but 70 or fewer policies is kind of what we have in mind for what we can handle on our capacity to actually do the additional analysis needed. Okay, so, and we know there's some overlap, so I'm putting these in two different buckets, but some things are both, right? Okay, so we're just talking resilience for now. Okay, so that was one thing I wanted to just mention. And I guess I will, the other thing I will say around that is, you may look at this list that we're going to talk about today and think something's missing. So there's nothing on that list that, you know, no one's decided on anything, right? We can add to it, we can take away from it. But if we are adding, we are going to ask you all to help us remove or consolidate, right? Just so that we keep it within a manageable number of policies. Okay, so that's that. The other thing I wanted to talk about is, and it's a little bit different if any of you have been involved in climate action plans for other jurisdictions, because we're coming up with a climate element in a comprehensive plan. And it's a little bit different in the sense that comprehensive plans are fairly general. So if you read a comprehensive plan chapter, the goals and policies often use fairly broad language. And my understanding of the reason for this is that in general, a comprehensive plan is considered a policy guide. I'm going to look at my notes here. So I say what the Growth Management Act actually says. So the comprehensive plan defines comprehensive plans as policy guides or generalized land use policy documents. So we can think of comprehensive plans guiding future decisions and actions, but the comprehensive plan in itself doesn't regulate anything, right? So we make a comprehensive plan, but not that much happens until what's in it starts to get implemented, okay, if that makes sense. So we have this general document that provides some guidance, but a lot of the details and specifics really start to show up when you start to implement a comprehensive plan policy. And there's a few ways that a comprehensive plan policy gets implemented. So sometimes development regulations, so things like the county's zoning code, they need to be written to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. So anything that happens in the county's, it's our Title 40, is our section of code, that's our development code. Any changes to that code have to be consistent with our comprehensive plan. Any public capital project that the county does, the project and its budget have to be consistent with what is in the comprehensive plan. So that's pretty significant as well. So the county's own projects have to follow the policies in this comprehensive plan. And then the third way that comprehensive plan policies get implemented is through programs. So the county can run a program, you know, it could be educational, right? It could be helping the community learn about certain things. It could be some sort of financial incentive program to help encourage people to do things. I think if, you know, the county has like tax exemption programs, like those would be a program kind of thing. So these other steps which would happen after the comprehensive plan gets adopted are where a lot of the details are really going to show up. So I'm saying all of this because we're going to look at a lot of goals and policies, and my initial reaction looking at them was, these seem kind of general. And I imagine you might feel the same way. So I just want to put that out there that this is a bit of why. I think we can still, there's plenty of, like I said, nothing is set. We can rewrite them. We can change the language in them. I think there's some different ways to make sure your interests are being represented. But again, just want to remind you, like, we're talking about fairly general policies that are going to guide future things that the county does. Okay, so the other things I just wanted to mention, we've kind of bucketed our resilience work and our greenhouse gas reduction work, but there is overlap. We recognize that there's some things that are both. The CAPA team, as they've been sorting through all the feedback, there's some things that we've just been putting on the list for, okay, we're going to talk about it when we get to greenhouse gas reduction, even though we recognize that there's overlap. And then the other thing I wanted to note is we do have a table where we've been tracking all of the feedback and then matching it to like, okay, does it fit with this policy or things like that. We are just finishing cleaning it up. We can share it out after this meeting so that you can see, is my feedback in there, and how did the team, you know, what did the team do with it, and how does it fit into some of these maybe broader policy ideas. Okay, I'm going to stop there because I think I talked longer than I was supposed to, and see if there are questions.
All right, thank you, Jenna. See a question from Jessica, and just a reminder to everyone to say your name.
Jessica Brown. So you said the policies are general, but shouldn't there be some way to measure the policies to make sure we're meeting our goals within them?
I think that's a good point, and we do have a monitoring requirement with this legislation where we need to be able to report on our progress. So I think that's something we should look at and discuss, because I'm not sure how much, of what I know we're going to share with you all, I'm not sure how well things are written in that fashion. So I think that is something we should consider on how would we know if we're making progress. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Let me go to Anne and then Noelle.
I think it would be helpful, oh, excuse me, Ann Foster, to sort of do some basic definitions of goals versus policy, as you sort of blend them on this slide, Jenna, for example. They're sort of mixed in together, almost like an either or. I look at a goal as it has to fit in under a vision. So maybe my goal is to lose 10 pounds by Memorial Day. Okay, so there's something measurable there. There's a start, there's a finish, there's a timeline built into it. And it fits under the vision of wanting to be 10 pounds thinner by June 1st, this kind of thing. So point being is, I think it would be helpful to sort of either disassociate goals from policies at this point, or better define goals as we're expected to come up with them in this exercise, as opposed to policies. Because a goal is not the same as a policy, obviously, right? Am I correct in making that leap?
Yeah, Anne, that's great. And I think in the next section, the team will define a little bit more the difference between a goal and policy. And when you see them on the list, I think it'll maybe be a little bit clearer too. But I'm looking at Dana and Zach over here, and they say they'll define it when we kind of go through the list in just a few minutes. Does that work?
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Noelle Lovern. So I'm thinking in terms of comprehensive plan, and we're headed right now into the SEPA process for the comprehensive plan. I can imagine that some of the policies that we're going to come up with will have an impact. Will they be studied under a separate SEPA, or how will that work?
Yeah, this is Jenna. I can answer that. So the SEPA process for the whole comprehensive plan update includes policy changes to the comprehensive plan. So this work we're doing on the climate element gets considered as part of that. So this is part of the overall comprehensive plan SEPA process. So whatever comes out of these policies will be considered, and perhaps, might actually be mitigation type, right? They might actually help mitigate other issues that are caused in the comp plan update, for instance. But yeah, so it's folded in as part of that.
So, but the SEPA process is happening right now for the other portion of the comprehensive plan. So will there be a revisiting of the SEPA process, or?
So we're, no, same process, but where we're at in SEPA is very early. So the actual analysis work is not going to happen until, it's going to start like the end of this year, where we'll at least have some draft ideas, and then this group should be done its work before the final SEPA documents are written. So time is a challenge on this project, as the legislation came out about a year ago. So we are moving as fast as we can, but the sequencing may not be ideal, but we're doing what we can.
All right, thank you. Okay, well, I think that we have set up these goals and policies a lot, and I'm sure you are ready to see them. But first, we're just going to take a 10-minute break. We're done with this section, right? Were there other slides? Just want to make sure. Oh, okay, let's go to the next slide then. That's okay, go ahead.
Hey everybody, Zach Curl, him, with Dana here for and I realize I'm between you and food, so I'll be really brief, because I think we kind of talked a little bit around what our methodology was. We took in your comments from last month after and an opportunity for EJC to provide some comment as well. We've distilled that down into 28 goals and 42 policies, which you'll be able to kind of review and weigh in on with your meeting materials. I wanted to kind of address the question that Ann had and thinking about like what are goals, what are policies. So you'll better, I think, understand it when you're looking at this document. Policies are essentially how to essentially implement the goal. The goal is more or less a kind of a value statement, if you will, trying to, you know, for example, it's a bit more broad strokes, so like encouraging resilient and sustainable agriculture, not spelling out what it is that you have to do to get to that point. But I think Jenna teed it up really well for it being a really good guideline for policymakers and local government to be able to implement the vision that is set out by this group and by this. Go to the next slide. So I just wanted to give you kind of a general sense of how we got to this point. So taking whoever had this great comment from our last meeting that, you know, ensuring that all public agencies can communicate on the same program or programs. This is kind of an emergency management theme. We essentially looked at all these 240 plus comments and ideas, reviewing them for similarities and trying to then review what we've audited from all of the existing documents of plans that Clark County has. So we looked at the existing comprehensive plan. We looked at the Parks, Recreation, Open Space plan, aging readiness plan, thank you. And then there's also Clark Regional Hazard Mitigation Plan. And so all these have, in some cases, some similar language that we might be able to revisit and refine to be more aligned with resilience. And then there's also this body of work that the State Department of Commerce provides us, just what was referenced earlier, the menu of measures. So if you haven't visited yet, it has over 200 different policies. They've gone through it with other committees and other jurisdictions to compile what they feel like is a robust tool from which we can potentially tap into. So we identified how these particular comments and your own contributions might align with existing policy or some of these menu of measures, and then identified from here proposed goal language and proposed policy. Can we go to the next slide? So here's your example. With this, ensuring all public agencies can communicate on same programs, we have within the comprehensive plan some language that might be sufficient, and or we can revisit and make sure that this comment is reflected in the future comprehensive plan. So I don't need to read that. We can move to the next slide. So I guess the one thing I want to say, there's a lot of words on these, and again, we're all hungry. So I just want to say that acknowledging that we had less goals that we've distilled out than policies, we can intuit that there's going to be multiple policies for some of these goals, and you'll see that here. For the practice of what we have time for, we're going to look at one policy to one goal statement. So acknowledging that there's, you know, maybe more policies there that exist from what we've identified that fit to a goal. I just want to acknowledge that there's, go ahead, Dan.
Oh, sorry. Thanks. I just want to add for clarity too, what you see on this slide is an illustration of what Jenna was mentioning before, which is that you all provided, and Noelle, you were getting at this too, there was some really good like action-oriented language and implementation-ready language that we heard, and we were not able to reflect all of that in specific goals and policies because of the limitations. But these are just a couple of examples. The bullet points show wonderfully detailed suggestions that we got from this group in the EJC. And then in bold, you'll see kind of the broader statement that's going to show up on our draft list that wraps all those things into it. So just wanted to illustrate that. You'll be seeing more of this when we send out that comment tracker that Jenna mentioned. I just wanted to tease that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a,
Okay, thank you. So hopefully that gives you a sense of, you know, what the goals and the policies are meant to be, and a little bit of a crash course in developing comprehensive plan language. It's pretty complicated, but I think it's important to understand this before we really dive in. So let's take a break and resume at 6:45, and then we'll get into reviewing the draft goals and policies. And if you did want a sneak peek during the break, while you're grabbing food or something, there is this big spreadsheet on your tables, and that's kind of what we're going to be going through in slide form as well. And I think we can put that in the chat too for virtual participants. So take a break and resume at 6:45. Okay, we're going to restart here. Hopefully everyone's back from break, online as well. So we're going to get into our resilience goals and policies part of today's meeting. And I do want to acknowledge a comment in the chat from Monica about making sure that we look at our vision statement as we talk about goals and policies. That is an excellent point. And for today's meeting, I think we just want to go through the list of goals and policies, the draft, and hear kind of initial reactions and thoughts. And at our next meeting, we can be sure to bring back in the vision statement so that we're aligning ourselves with that as we continue the discussion, if that works, Monica. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, I'll just describe what we're going to do here. So we're going to go through the 11 sectors. Hopefully you all are getting used to these as being sort of the framing for the way that we do the work for the resilience sub-element. So we're going to go through Dana and Zach are going to go through the draft goals and policies for each of those 11 sectors. And we want to hear from you just your initial thoughts on whether it seems like that set of goals and policies is building resilience to the impacts of climate change. And just a reminder, a quick definition of resilience would be that communities are prepared for and able to bounce back from climate-related stress. So as we go through these goals and policies, if you think that there's some adaptations or changes that could be made to make them better, to better make the communities resilient, we would welcome those thoughts today. And you will also have time after today's meeting, because this is a lot to get through. We recognize that you need time to kind of think through this, so you'll have time to provide any written comments after today's meeting too. But you know, we want to spend at least like 7 or 8 minutes on each sector, just getting your initial ideas. Does that sound good? All right, then let's go to the next slide. And I think Zach is kicking it off. Oh, Dana is, okay, go ahead.
Okay, so this is the agriculture and food system sector. I'm just going to do a little bit of explanation about what you're seeing here before I get into the specific goals and policies, and you'll see this type of table for each sector. So in the left-hand column is the proposed goal. This is, again, sort of like the consolidated goal, comp plan friendly goal language version of what we've heard from you all as priorities, things to keep thinking about. In the middle column is a proposed policy, and on the right is the source of that policy. So like Zach mentioned, when we were working through your comments and goals, we were looking for matches to existing policies, either from the comprehensive plan, the natural hazards mitigation plan, the menu of measures, and in some cases, the policy that you see here is just based on a rewording of CAG and EJC input. It's not from an existing plan or the menu of measures. And in other cases, you'll see that it says combo. It might say combo of menu of measures and comp plan, which means we kind of put two policies together that we thought made a good match. So that's what you'll see here. And I'll just paraphrase, try to avoid reading word for word off of these dense slides. But so for the agriculture and food systems sector, our first goal is about encouraging resilient and sustainable agricultural production. That's a big goal. And the policy that we've come up with that we think helps address that and leaves open a lot of space for specific implementation directions is a policy about supporting conservation programs, research, technical assistance, and resources that provide direct assistance to farmers and give them the ability to address the impacts of climate change in the agricultural sector. The second is improve resilience of food distribution. So this is a newly worded policy that came out of the CAG and EJC meetings as a way to possibly address that goal and achieve that goal would be to think about relocating any food distribution nodes throughout the county that are known to be in hazard-prone areas, and that might limit damage or disruptions in food distribution systems resulting from future climate events. And the third goal in this sector is to promote local food economies and local agriculture or farming businesses. We have two policies that go with this goal. The first is about food security, making sure that everyone has secure, consistent access to healthy and affordable food. and thinking about foods that can be produced sustainably, under the climate future that is projected for this region. And the second policy is about facilitating land access so that farmers have continued access to land and can grow the food and do the work and keep that local. So I will stop there and turn it back to Sylvia for some discussion.
Yeah, so we'll open it up to comments and thoughts on whether it seems like this list of goals and policies gets us to more resilience in the agriculture and food systems sector. And I see some tent cards up. I'll go to Jessica and then Dawn and then Nick. We tried to finagle your tent card so that it wouldn't stay up, but you got past it. But Jessica, Dawn, and then Nick.
Jessica Brown. So I was just thinking then that first policy, the support conservation programs policy, that it says that you're going to support them, but only if they provide direct financial access to farmers. It might be nice if it was both direct and indirect financial support or improvement for our farming community. And then just looking on here, I was trying to read between the lines, and maybe it's more of a goal thing than a policy thing. Somewhere where we could have a policy that maybe like high-density housing offer green space so that people can grow their own food in urban environments, or if they're in an urban desert, they would still have access to fresh food.
Thank you. And Dawn?
Yes, how's the volume? We have audio problems in here, and so is this, what's best for me, this distance or this distance or this distance? Okay. And I don't even know if Zach had his mic on when he talked. I could hear him, but it didn't sound like it was coming through the system, but so anyway. So I added on the third proposed policy under ag, access also to water. I know at least 2 farmers in Clark County who access to water is the biggest challenge that they have. They already have in one case, they already had the land, but now they're told they can't have the water they want. And the second case, the farmer rented the land from somebody who had water rights already. And so, and with the increased drought being forecast, I would just add water or says facilitate increased land access for local farmers, providing affordable agricultural land ownership and water, I would add.
Great, thank you, Dawn. And Nick, and then I see some hands online. I'll go to you next.
Nick Massey, I'm confused. I might have got lost here, but these are the goals that we provided, and now we're talking about different goals. I know, but why?
Yeah, Nick, what I went over before and what you see on that like 8.5 by 11 printout, those are just thematic summaries of what came out of the last meeting. They're not specific goal or policies. So this one is just themes. We use these themes to take to the EJC in their last meeting as a way to kind of concisely recap all of the sticky notes and ideas that came out of the CAG meeting. We distilled it into these theme statements, but that was all in service to getting to this point where we can talk about more specific goals and policies. The themes was like a milestone along the way.
Okay, but these are from where? Did you guys bring these to us? I mean, why are we even here is my question. If we create goals, but you guys change them over here on this side.
So what you see in this version, being realistic about the limitations of the number of goals and policies that we have, we had to do some condensing to get from 240 suggestions to approximately 35 policies. So these what you see on this spreadsheet, to the best of our ability, reflect a condensed synthesis of what we heard from this group and the EJC, but we've had to, you know.
Sorry, I can't take that on face value.
And so, Nick, I would just encourage you, if you're seeing that there's something in the words that don't reflect what you said last time, this is a team's best.
Well, that's not my point at all, Sylvia. My point is we came in here, we did a brainstorming session, we came up with goals. Now you're coming back and you said, now you've taken the goals and you've put them into a form we're going to be looking at here that has no relation to the goals we did, other than we'd have to try to cross-draft these things. So why is the purpose of even having brainstorming sessions if you already have the information from this measures of, this menu of measures? Why don't we just go through the menu of measures and put them in place?
Yeah, so I mean, when we pick from the menu of measures, that's just one option as a starting point.
Oh, we
to
started
match.
with these goals. I don't understand why we have to go to the menu of measures now. Why are we not? We were asked to sit on a committee to come up with goals for the climate action. We sat down as a group and we came up with a set of goals that said what we wanted to do. You prepared said set of goals and brought them to the meeting. Now I'm looking at another table with information that doesn't correlate over with the set of goals that we did on the last meeting.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so thanks for pointing that out. So Nick, at our last meeting, it was a brainstorm session, and the intent of the brainstorm was not that those exact words were going to become goals, but that they would inform a set of goals. Because there are so many ideas and there are other pieces that need to be brought in. And so here, like on the left-hand side are the proposed goals, and that if in this list it doesn't seem like it's reflective of what the CAG wants to move forward with, that's the conversation for today. And then the policies, a lot of those are coming from different sources that already exist in plans. I think as was described before, it's just it's easier to connect that way. But today is the time to bring in any thoughts you have that you think are not reflected here. So do you have anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, again, I don't appreciate this. I think it's, well, I feel like a lamb being led to slaughter, that we have these things that are pre-made for us, so we're just coming in here to rubber stamp it. And if that's the case, then that's not what we should be doing in here. We are a diverse group that gave you a set of goals that we did on that, and now I feel like we're getting a change of all this stuff to force feed us information that we haven't had even read upon. We haven't got this to us, and we didn't even know what this was until tonight. And so I just don't like the way this is being put out to us right now. I think it's indigenous, and it's not, we're not contributing to this discussion, because all we're doing is giving you some and stuff, and now you're coming out with a different list back. Does that make sense what I'm saying? I don't know if anybody else agrees with me or not, but that's what I'm seeing from it.
Yeah, Nick, I think I do appreciate what you're saying. It makes sense. We are working on another document that we didn't have ready for today that we'll share soon, which does show your exact words, the exact transcription of what came out of the last CAG meeting, what we took off of sticky notes and what we got through emails, and shows how each of those 200+ comments ties into one of these goals and policies. So, I mean, that will at least illustrate our thought process. But yes,
all I'm looking at is 30 some odd goals here, and that's why I'm confused at the 246. If this is what we said to you, there's 30 here. Where's the other
those are just
110 at?
Yeah, those are the theme, just the summary theme statements. So you'll see those 240 in that, it's called the comment tracker, is what we're calling it, that will come out soon. I wish it was here for this meeting right now, but that's where you'll see all 240. Those themes on that one printout are just a thematic summary, just that. Those are not exactly what we heard from you last time either.
I need that tracker to correlate with this. I don't think it's fair for us to go through this without having something we've already seen. You guys didn't have time to prepare it. you should have before we came to this meeting, so we could follow along with what we're talking about. You know how it's all tied together intricately. We have no idea.
Okay, thanks, Nick, for those thoughts. I'll keep going online to see if folks have any other comments on the agricultural and food system goals. So let's go to Monica and then Anne and Gabriella.
Thank you. Yes. So I wrote some things down. So with water trenches, I sent you all a video about how over in India, there was water deserts, and the community came together and they dug like they made mile-long trenches, and they dug some places where when the rain came, those areas would be filled up with water, and it actually created where people that moved away from that community came back, and it created a thriving community again. And so creating those water trenches and water ponds for our water shortages here, because I'm aware of one of the farmers that Don is talking about, and we need more water. And then also just no pesticides. If we really want to be looking at this holistically, everything that we do to our Mother Earth, we do to ourselves. And so by using pesticides and by using poison, that's coming back to us, and it's going into our Earth sinks, our Mother Earth. And also something else is that over in India, they did this as well, as they used cows and the cows' urine for their farms, and they took away the pesticides, and then they realized that the urine was creating more yield of food and for them than the pesticides ever did. And then also with the rewilding our community, we need to have gardens at homes, apartments, duplexes, tiny villages, and also on grocery store rooftops. I mean, if we, made it so where certain areas, let's say Bagley Downs or Shumway or whatever, produce a certain kind of food, we could all share with each other. And so that would remove the need for, long distances of bringing in food from far away. And we could actually be like, hey, neighbor, what do you got? And create some sort of map of where you could get, of what food where. So those were my comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica. And Anne?
So first of all, just in response, is that echoing my problem, or is it coming from? Okay. So in response to Nick's concerns, I'm actually finding this process really a good exercise, and I'm not dissuaded by the fact that you've done a lot of the heavy lifting by taking what we brainstormed a month ago and putting them into the format that would be recognizable for the comprehensive growth plan. The other thing I wanted to point out is, and Jenna, you might correct me if I'm wrong here, I believe if any of this section on agriculture and food systems actually gets adopted into the comprehensive plan update, it's going to be one of the first times we see the word food anywhere in a comprehensive plan update. Because we have tried over the last 2 rounds to get food access, food distribution, the impact of food shortages into the plan, and it has never made it into the final version. So the significance to me of seeing even these words, given the possibility of getting accepted into the 2025 plan, is inspirational. In terms of the proposed policies that you've got, we do have conservation programs through the Conservation District and through WSU Extension Services, including research, technical assistance, and resources. It's the financial assistance to farmers that we don't have through any local sources. Certainly there is the availability through USDA grants and occasionally WSDA grants, but those are infrequent and often very difficult to access for farmers. So somehow rewording it to say, to put the emphasis on the direct assistance would be more in line, I think, with what's relevant. And then on the comment and Don and Monica, your input on water is well taken. It's just that it's a state issue. There's not too much that Clark County can do about water distribution and water rights, which is unfortunate. And the same with, you know, I mean, not only do local farmers need water, but they also need labor. And there's not too much that Clark County can do about that, given that the major problem lies in the hands of the federal government. So, but other than that, I think you've done a pretty good job, and will look forward to the next couple of weeks of being able to actually sort of dive a little deeper into between the lines here and reword where I think more appropriate. I still wish we could separate out agriculture from food systems, because in fact they are two different issues and require two different sets of policies. But it sounds as though this is pretty much set in stone, so we'll go with what we got. Thank you.
Hi, this is Gabriela. So can you hear me? My internet is kind of choppy. That's why I'm off camera. I hope you can hear me. I want to mention, I did want to bring up the use of pesticides in agriculture, because that's one of the main concerns with going along with the environment, farming, agriculture, and health disparity. Because when we eat all those pesticides, we reflect the illnesses that those pesticides bring to us. And thank you, Monica, for mentioning that. I had that already in my notes. And also, I want to mention that I don't know if we could put something about the gentrification of our farmers, because I've seen local farmers being pushed out of their farming land because the land is sold to build new neighborhoods or stores. And I wonder if we can put something in that, in the last proposed policy about that issue, the gentrification of farmers. Thank you.
Sylvia, we cannot hear you.
Andrea, can you make your comment?
Yeah, thank you. I was just curious if there's any information or data I can find on how many people are interested in pursuing agricultural jobs in the future. I've not seen that be an initiative pushed forward by any economic development institutions in our community, and I was just curious what the level of interest was, and if there are other things that maybe take more precedence. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Andrea. All right, then we'll move into the next sector, and I'll pass it back to Dana. And again, please send more comments in after today's meeting, and we'll go over that a little bit at the end of this. Go ahead, Dana.
Next slide, please.
Can you go to the next slide? Oh, there, never mind.
We got it, okay. All right, so our next sector, we're just going alphabetically here, is buildings and energy. So we have 3 goals, each with 1 corresponding policy. The first is improve the safety and reliability of energy infrastructure vulnerable to climate change. And the policy that goes with that is a combination of something that was provided in the menu of measures as well as the natural hazard mitigation plan. And that is work with energy utilities to improve reliability of infrastructure that's vulnerable to climate change, so connecting with utilities there. And then also as a secondary piece of that policy would be for the county to install backup power systems in any critical facilities and on critical electronic equipment. Second goal is provide assistance for maintenance and rehabilitation of housing for Clark County residents and design new housing with mechanical and/or passive cooling and heating capacity. So this is really getting at something we've heard from both the CAG and EJC about the need for temperature control in homes to keep people safe from extreme temperatures. So part of that is retrofitting existing buildings for energy efficiency and weatherization. But the other piece of that is to incentivize new development to include passive and efficient cooling systems as well as heating systems so that everyone has access to affordable in-home heating and cooling. And then the third is support innovative green technology and renewables in the energy sector. So again, this policy that you see here is not from an existing plan or the menu of measures. This was crafted from CAG and EJC's input over the last month or so. And we heard that folks would like to support energy choice. And since we're talking about climate resilience here, we want to focus that in on available renewable energy technologies and innovations, such as utility scale, community scale, or household scale wind and solar power. And this also feeds into this idea of promoting self-reliance within communities by providing kind of community scale utilities or energy generating systems so that if the main power grid goes down, folks have things like solar and battery systems, microgrids in their communities that they can turn to as a backup. So pause there for feedback.
Great, thank you, Dana, and hopefully people can hear me. I'm going to go online first to Kathy, and then I'll go to the 10 cards that are in the room.
Thank you. This is Kathy Mew. I had a comment around the second policy. Actually, on a previous slide, there was a bullet point where providing congregate resources for heating, cooling contributed, I think, to the new goal. But then when we got to this slide, that idea isn't shown. I think it was before, I think, our break. So when you go back to building and energy, I think there's a lot of emphasis about, again, individual homes being energy efficient and having heating and cooling. But in the case that there are communities where it is not available in home, it would be great that there's a congregate area that people know they can access heating and cooling, and it's not dependent on their own homes having that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kathy. I'll go to Noelle and then Brent.
Noelle Lovern. Just looking at some of the technologies we're talking about as far as batteries, solar, wind turbines, all of those require mineral resources. And I will, again, iterate that I feel like climate resiliency has to address our access to our mineral resources. So, yeah, we can't have batteries without various mineral resources. And I think, if you don't grow it, you mine it. And so look around the room, look around your universe, and that's pretty accurate. So we need to be considering that, and comp plan requires us to manage our mineral resources too. All
right, thank you. Did I say Brent next?
Hello, Brent Marston. I just have a quick question. Where is the Clark Public Utilities District involved in this planning? I don't see them here. I presume they're involved. So that's my question.
Go ahead.
This is Jenna. I can answer that. So yeah, Clark Public Utilities, we do actually have Terry who's in this group. He's not here today. He does happen to work for Clark Public Utilities, but he is participating as individually as himself. But we have a third advisory group that we're calling on as needed of sort of partner agency folks. And so we do have Clark PUD involved in that group. So they are, we are consulting with them along the way as well.
Great, thank you. Dawn and then Jessica.
This is Don Steinke. Regarding the first policy under buildings and energy, I would like to add distributed energy resources. If you have your resource in just one spot, then, and there's an emergency that slices those lines, then there's no other option. So having distributed energy resources is a new model for the utilities industry. And also going with that is distributed energy resource management systems. We call those DERs and DERMS. I attend all the PUD meetings and speak at all of them, and have for 10 years. And but I'm not representing them. And that's all I have to say at the moment.
This is Jessica Brown. I was just wondering, on the first one, there was nothing in here about putting our utility lines underground, but usually when we have big emergencies, it's because the trees knock the power lines down, then we all lose power. So if we could get our lines underground, hopefully that would help mitigate some of that. And then going off of Noel's comment about our mineral resources, there are hydrogen fuel cells, which isn't added in here, the fuel cell, and it doesn't rely on the batteries and not as many mineral resources.
All right, thanks, Jessica. And Monica online?
Awesome, thank you. So with the mineral resources comment, I also had concern over lithium ion batteries too, but there's this new technology that just came out with sodium ion batteries. And so I would love, more research to be done on that, because that is more plentiful than the lithium ion, and it's not, in other countries over there. We have it here. And so they just released a new car with it too, but it's also being used for other for energy as well. And then there's also something that I sent you all with new technology on this one, like this small box thing that you put in your house that gathers the moisture from the air that heats and cools your home. And so I also put that in my comments. I sent in my comments to you all. But then I would love to advocate for not more growth, but we don't need more things. We need to degrowth, and we need to, work with what we have. And so just trying to work within the means of our planetary boundaries and just, and do good by our Mother Earth. So those are my comments for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica. And let's go to Dave in the room.
Yeah, this is Dave Rowe. I just want to follow up with what Monica's saying about the first part. We need to look at more alternatives for a backup storage facility, whether it's a battery or other facilities that is coming online, whether it's sodium or there'll be others I think will be coming up in the future that we need to know that there is. We can keep storage area in our county that would be local. We wouldn't have to rely on the grid that we have today.
Okay, thanks, Dave, and thanks everyone for the great comments. Let's move into the next sector.
Okay, this one is cultural resources and practices. So 3 goals, 4 policies here. The first goal, I am going to read this in full. It's a bit of a long one, but ensure that cultural resources and practices, including significant historic sites and culturally important traditional foods and natural resources, are resilient to the impacts of extreme weather and other natural hazards worsened by climate change, and that those are accessible to everyone. So 2 policies to support that goal. The first is about establishing county-wide programs to identify historical sites and resources that the communities that we're working with value, find ways to protect them, and also educate the public about the history of the region and those resources, and that's coming from the Clark County Comprehensive Plan. Another policy that we have here, which is based on a combination of language from the Comprehensive Plan and the menu of measures, is to really focus in on this idea of using native plants in landscaping, particularly adjacent to critical areas. We want to discourage the use of non-native plants and work with partner agencies. As an example of how this might go, the county could work with partner agencies to establish a native plant nursery and seed bank to keep track and keep protected our native plant resources. The second goal is improve public awareness of environmental topics, including native plant varieties, benefits and care, ecosystem functions, and human relationships to nature. And this policy is based on CAG and EJC input, and it would be to develop education programs that target youth and climate-affected communities, to build resilience by increasing those groups' general understanding of environmental processes, challenges, and different stewardship strategies that are available. And the third is work collaboratively with tribal partners and culturally specific groups on climate resilience efforts. And that's also something that we heard directly from CAG and EJC, the idea to collaborative work with culturally specific groups and tribes so that the strategies that come up for climate adaptation, for community education content, for emergency response strategies, that those can all be culturally specific and appropriate for different groups.
All right, thanks, Dana. So I'll open it up to any comments about whether it seems like this list of goals and policies will make the community more resilient to the impacts of climate change for the cultural resources and practices, and just any thoughts you have to improve these. I think I'll go first to Kathy and Dawn. Is your 10 card up for this one? Okay. Kathy, and then Dawn, and then Monica.
Thank you. I just have a comment on the first proposed policy. I hope that we have been always identifying our important historical sites and resources and protecting them as traditionally. I think in light of climate change, I think we have to be a little bit more innovative about it, as we might not have a choice in how we protect them. And so in the Jamboard, I suggested thinking about how to preserve them potentially digitally or another means, because we might not have physical ability to protect them. Thank you.
I think the word salmon needs to be written in that policy for the proposed goal. It says ensure the cultural resources and practices. That has to be salmon. That's missing there. It's kind of like, that's the duh. And it's that great risk from climate change. And then when it talks about historic sites, we can't just think back to 1811. We have a lot of natives in the area. I'm friends with many of the tribes, and they're here, and they are surviving, and they want to be, they want their sovereignty to be recognized, particularly their treaty rights. And probably at the top of that is salmon, but not just having them exist, but having them abundant is what they would, pretty much what they would say. That's all I have to say at the moment.
Thank you. And Monica, and then Noel.
I am echoing with what Don said. We need to like the natives, the original inhabitants of this location, like need to be at the table. They need to like their voices need to be heard. They have so much knowledge running through them, and so I really hope that we reach out in more ways than just sending an email. Physically go and really like ask what they need, want, and what could help them. Even though, there's many things that we do already know, but to help them. But then, and also with the education piece, everyone's on different things. Everyone's looking at different ways to get their information via, Facebook or the news. If you swipe right or whatever on your phone, you get a news feed. But people are out in their cars and they're seeing billboards, and I will keep on advocating for billboards because if we have like learn about your cultural resources and practices here, and come to this event, you can get more people seeing that instead of seeing win $1 billion in the lottery or look at our great healthcare system. We actually need to have climate related things on those billboards. So to get people thinking about that. So yes, thank you.
Thank you. And Noel?
Noelle Lovern. I'm curious, so on the policy, develop education programs targeting youth in climate affected communities, just curious why we're narrowing to youth and climate affected communities. Seems like the broader that we're educating, the better, but I'm just curious why those two were chosen.
Those were specified in this policy language just because they were specified in some of the CAG and EJC feedback, but definitely heard that we could kind of like still point to those groups, but expand the language a bit more too.
Okay, great. Well, let's move into our next sector. I'll hand it back over to Dana.
Okay, economic development. There's 2 goals here, 3 policies. First one is to promote long-term economic development that will improve environmental quality and climate resilience and accommodate job-generating activities. So we definitely heard a lot from both groups in your comments about green jobs, and not just green jobs even, but climate response kinds of jobs. So things like installing and maintaining green infrastructure, being trained to respond to severe weather events with emergency or support services, doing ecosystem restoration work. So this first policy is really about facilitating opportunities for those types of jobs and focusing especially on job creation within communities that are most impacted by climate hazards. The second policy on that same goal is to support local businesses' efforts to bolster climate preparedness and continuity of operation. So that's in response to that bit of feedback we got about wanting businesses to be prepared so that they can keep going or reopen more quickly after disasters, and encourage as well continuing education, mentoring, just skill building for employers, both large and small, so that they feel continuously prepared to get through climate stressors. And then the second goal is support sustainable practices in economic and industrial sectors to reduce waste and consumption. And this is where we have that circular economy idea coming back up that we heard from this group and the EJC as well. But this is actually from the menu of measures, the policy that you see here. So this idea of trying to increase demand for reused materials and lessen our demand for new raw materials, and also reducing carbon emissions that might go along with that.
Great, thank you. I'll open it up to any comments or thoughts on these goals and policies for economic development. Okay, see a tent card up from Dawn, go ahead.
I wanted to have a time to just say I am a little bit frustrated with the process because we get these things blindsided. We don't have a chance to dive into it and reflect on it. And that happened at the last meeting and then at this meeting too. So we're seeing this for the for the first time. However, as long as you're willing to accept comments afterwards, that's what matters. But doing it here is a little bit difficult. Then regarding the economic development sector, part of resilience, I think, should be that where you live, you have the amenities nearby. When I see a picture of a development in the newspaper and the people live in this development, but there's no amenities, there's no services, there's no doctors, dentists, no food, and so to me, looking for my notes, you had provide in the original document, provide jobs close to housing, and I would say the jobs and amenities should be close to housing, and then also reverse that and have housing near existing job sites and amenities. I was thinking just as an example, Peace Health, Mill Plain, almost everybody, the parking lot is full of staff that comes there, but what if they live right nearby, so they didn't have to drive so far? And that would be a form of resilience. Well, not so much, that's not a resilience issue, or it could be, but resilience, part of resilience is affordability, and if they didn't have to drive so far and have extra cars, if there were houses close by, that would be a form of resilience. And regarding a circular economy, our legislature passed something this couple months ago to have pilot projects for thermal energy networks. And that would be to use the existing gas lines to serve districts with geothermal energy. Geothermal meaning something like hot water from heat pumps, and it'd be an economic development plan. But it's just a pilot project, and they're already doing a pilot project in Massachusetts. But anyway, that's something to keep on the back burner is that. And then another, I don't know if where would this fit? Right across the river in Portland, there's a building called the PAE building, and it's net zero energy. So they don't need, and at times of the year they'll need some energy, but it's over the course of the year, it's net zero energy. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Don, and appreciate the process comment as well. We'll strive to get things out in advance as well. And today we are hoping to kind of go through these and of course welcome more written comment after the meeting, but I appreciate the frustration too. Of course. All right, online, let's go to Monica.
Thank you. Okay, I go into my notes. Okay, so yes, having community, planting trees, maintaining the trees, maintaining the gardens that are around, for, big picture of having gardens everywhere, and having them also maintain the wild spaces and everything. Also, and rewilding, and then also teaching the community from it being from, kiddos all the way up to the elderly. Because I heard the comment before about the youth and, the vulnerable, impacted, but it's like, we need everyone in on this. We don't want to have any wording that makes it that someone feels excluded, because this is all of our place, all of our Mother Earth. And then also we need to, redefine how like a business is even and restructure how business is even owned and how the money is divvied up, because without the people there wouldn't be the business, and so I know right now it's like we have like these big CEOs or companies that they're getting all the money and then the workers are doing the majority of the work. Well, we need to create systems where it's actually like you all get a share of the pie, not just, you know, oh, here's your small share. And so that brings community together, and it brings like you have a stake in it, and it makes you feel better. And so creating, you know, systems like that actually create happier people, and people that I can actually afford to live, you know? So those were my comments right now. And then also there was a net positive comment that I'm looking for in my notes, but I don't have it right now. So if you had just call back on me, that would be great.
Thanks, Monica. And Anne? Anne Foster?
Sorry, didn't click the mute button. This is reiterating, I think, a little bit of what Don said, but on the third item here of the proposed policy column, promoting local economic and industrial development, I would like to see added in there residential development as well. And this is sort of in support of the concept that residential development needs some commercial activity locally, geographically located near them in order to minimize the number of car trips they have to take to get a cup of coffee or pick up some groceries or do what they need to do. So somehow to build that concept in. That's it.
All right, thank you, Anne. Okay, with that, let's go into our next topic, which is ecosystems.
I found my comment. Sorry. Is it okay if I share
Go ahead,
it?
Monica.
Thank you so much.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm echoing. So in this one episode, Nate Higgins, The Great Simplification, a man by the name of Tom Chi, is the founder and managing partner of At One Ventures, a venture capital fund focused on technologies that help humanity become a net positive for nature. And so Tom discusses several of At One's investments in companies like developing regenerative technologies, like autonomous electric tractors and air conditioning alternatives with much lower environmental impact. It's one of the videos that I sent you all. And so it'll be in the comments that have been submitted. So if anyone wants to take a further listen on that, but it's actually working with our environment. And creating jobs around that. So yes, that's all I had. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica. Okay, next slide, please. All right, ecosystems. First goal, protect, conserve, and recover salmonids and other fish species within Clark County. And the policy that goes with that is restore the structure and function of streams and floodplains to increase habitat climate resilience for cold water fish. I should say the proposed policy that goes with that. That one's from the menu of measures. Second goal is increase tree canopy cover and green spaces. And this policy is, again, some combined language from the menu of measures as well as some language that we got from CAG and EJC meetings in the last month. So choose native, drought and pest resistant trees, shrubs, and grasses in restoration efforts to support resilience. The idea of increasing tree canopy, especially in urban areas, so that we can combat the urban heat island effect and provide shade. And then also thinking about opportunities for community engagement and stewardship related to this green space. The third goal is protect and conserve environmentally critical areas, including riparian areas, urban and rural open space, wetlands, and forests. Part of that is ensuring no net loss of ecosystem composition, perhaps. So thinking about how to maintain the function of priority habitats in critical areas and striving for a net ecological gain. And the second policy proposed is that restoration strategies should be developed and implemented such that ecosystem processes are sustainable in the long term.
All right, I'll open it up to any comments or thoughts on how these goals and policies do for resilience in the ecosystem sector. All right, I'll go to Dave first.
Dave Rowe. Third part is protect and conserve critical areas, and I'm really an anti-mega bridge that they're proposing on the I-5. That's going to be a mega heat island in Vancouver. I just wanted to make that statement.
Okay, thanks, Dave. And Don?
Ecosystems, yeah, this is Don Stanky. It seems like we're only thinking of impacts to humans. I don't see anything about wildlife. Maybe there is something about wildlife there, but in the middle, on the second point, I would add that habitat needs to be connected so that they can migrate, and I think we all know that. And then in the category of ecosystems, is our atmosphere part of the ecosystem? That should be, I think, added as, and that's climate. And I'll just leave it at that.
All right, thanks, Don. And Jessica?
Hi, Jessica Brown. I was just wondering if you could tell me what is the difference between priority habitats and critical habitats, and what are the definitions for both of those?
This is Jenna. So these are terms that are coming out of other state legislation and other parts of the Growth Management Act. And so I don't have the exact definitions in front of my head, but in front of me. But priority habitats are actually one piece of critical areas. So there are different types of what the state considers critical areas. So those include, let's see if I can do this off the top of my head. There are geologic hazard areas. There are wetlands, thank you. There's then, I'm going to say it's basically like priority habitat, which are, the state defines those in different ways on what's considered priority habitat, and sometimes it is related to the presence of a certain species, like it's actually tied to the presence of species or possible presence of species, and then other times it's, like riparian habitat gets folded into that. So I'm doing a poor job explaining this, but anyway, so the state defines what that is, and it's not just one thing. There's a range of types of habitats that are in that category. So we've got wetland habitat. We have critical aquifer recharge areas is the fourth critical area, which, are key areas that have been designated in the county where it's really important that water is recharging our aquifers and that it's kept clean. So what can be built there matters. And then I have to think about the fifth. I'm wondering if, no. Oh yeah, so it's the floodplains, basically, yeah. Yeah, and so floodplains is the fifth, and the fish and wildlife habitat areas is the same bucket as what priority habitat areas is, anyway, folds into. So geologic areas, flooding areas, wildlife habitat, priority habitat, critical aquifer recharge areas, and wetlands. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, let's keep moving along into the next sector, which is emergency management.
Yes. Okay. So we have just 2 goals on here, but a total of 5 policies. So first goal is to develop a county-wide emergency management, recovery, and resiliency plan for specific climate-related hazards. So thinking about different response strategies for different types of hazards. The first policy there from the Natural Hazards Mitigation Plan is to strengthen and build redundancy into infrastructure and prioritize folks in isolated areas when we're thinking about emergency management. Second proposed policy is to think about climate impacts when planning preparedness, response, recovery activities. So really thinking ahead about how climate impacts might create unusual circumstances for first responders, for law enforcement, for schools, and other emergency personnel. Third policy is develop and implement a comprehensive information management system. So that's, again, this idea that came up in our example earlier today about making sure that all of these agencies that coordinate on emergency response are on the same page and able to communicate. And then the fourth policy under this goal that we propose is to assess and improve the adaptive capacity of people who are most vulnerable to climate-exacerbated hazards. So that idea of building capacity within local communities so that folks are more prepared when extreme weather does happen to kind of protect themselves. Second goal here is to improve access to resiliency and mitigation information. This is a pretty big topic here. The proposed goal we have is a combination of some language from the Natural Hazards Mitigation Plan and the menu of measures. And it probably could even be longer, but what it currently says is first that Clark County maintain a web page that could have, this says pertinent hazard mitigation topics and information, and that could include anything from info about how to retrofit your home, defensible space to protect against wildfire. It could include things like emergency volunteer setups, also info to support public outreach and education so that people are aware of hazard risks and can be prepared. And within this, we've also included the policy suggestion to develop and implement notification alerts that reduce risk exposure specifically to wildfire smoke and particulate matter so that people get a notification when those hazards are present.
All right, I'll open it up to comments. I see a 10 card up from Noel.
So I was just looking at the improve access to resiliency and mitigation information. For some reason, this feels less of a policy and more like a tactic, and so it just felt a little interesting to me. Seems to me it like a broader, rather than a web page, maybe a communication program or education program would be maybe more policy oriented than.
All right, thank you. Any others on this? Yeah, Don?
I'm kind of torn on this emergency thing. I live in the urban forest interface, and if there's a forest fire, well, I had to be evacuated 2 years ago when the fire in East County. And I don't know that it should be the responsibility of the county to worry about me. I think it's my fault for living out in the trees. So I'm torn. I don't know what the solution is there, but I'm thinking that not building where there's trees nearby and having fireproof roofs would be a big step. In my case, I'm thinking I can take all the trees away from within 500 feet if I wanted to, but the embers that might fall into the gutters would start my house, ignite my house, and I don't. That's a problem, and I don't have a remedy. I'll just leave it at that.
Great, thank you, Don. All right, let's move on to the next one. All right, next up we have health and well-being, also one where we got a lot of feedback with ideas. So proposed goal number 1, protect community health and well-being from the impacts of climate-exacerbated hazards, prioritizing focus on overburdened communities, and ensure that the most vulnerable residents do not bear disproportionate health impact. So that encompasses a lot of potential strategies, but we have 2 policies here that support that. First is evaluate and implement habitat reduction and population control for arthropod disease vectors. So this is really focused on something that we don't maybe talk about or hear about as much in this climate resilience discussion, but the potential for pests, disease-carrying pests, to increase with climate change.
And the second is protect health and well-being of outdoor workers exposed to extreme heat and other climate-exacerbated hazards. And that can include certainly farm workers, which came up in some of this group's comments and EJC comments. Second goal is establish regular and/or emergency centers where locals can access resources, a safe space, and supportive services, and reconnect with others during and after an extreme weather event or emergency. So this speaks to a comment that we heard earlier in feedback, which is, like a congregate space to access air conditioning, for example, that would be captured under this proposed policy, but the policy states develop resilience hubs. So these are community serving facilities that do offer a variety of support services, distribute resources, and hopefully make it easier for communities to get through extreme weather events and kind of resume normal life afterwards. Third goal is maintain and enhance the region's air quality. This one is fairly straightforward, but Clark County's air resource is to be managed to preserve and enhance air quality. That's an existing policy in the comprehensive plan. And the last goal is to connect outdoor recreation to public health. And on that same note, promote access to green spaces, parks, and recreational areas, which provide opportunities for physical activity, stress reduction, and social connection, among other things that we have listed here. And the policy to support that goal would be to just provide a diversified system of parks, trails, and open spaces that contribute to a high quality of life.
All right, thanks, Dana. We'll open it up to see if there are any comments or thoughts on how well these goals and policies meet resilience to climate change for health and well-being. And I'll also do a shout out to folks that we haven't heard as much from. I think most of you have been engaged pretty well in most of these conversations, but if anyone have thoughts that we haven't heard very much from, would welcome that as well. I'll go to Monica. Go ahead, Monica.
Yes. So I love having spaces. It's my baby. About having spaces for people to come during weather events, after weather events, but also teaching them what if they don't have a blanket, or what if they want to learn how to sew, create blankets for people in extreme cold weather. Actually, try to bring crafts that and teach people how to do things, because I know when I learn something new, I gain so much more confidence, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't feel dumb. I feel like I'm like, oh my gosh, now I know this new skill, and it makes me feel very happy. And I think promoting those good feelings and promoting learn how to do something in this hub would actually be very beneficial for health and well-being.
All right, thank you. I'll go to Gabriella online, and then Justin, and then come around here.
Yes, thank you. I just want to say that I do like, I came out wrong. I do like the proposed policy. I'm talking about the first part on the evaluate and implement habitat reduction of pollution control, and it talks about mosquitoes, ticks, rodents. So I think there has to be an education part on this, and also an incentive for landlords, because we have a lot of landlords that their apartment complexes are infested with cockroaches, mice, etc. I have several families from the organization that report they get infested from the neighbor buildings or the neighbor apartments, things like that, and then they don't get resolved. So this brings a lot of stress for these families. They are already very impacted by being low income and having difficulty with language access, but also having children with disabilities. So when they face any of these pests in their home, it's even more stressful, because it's just the fact of having a rodent in the house or multiple rodents in the house or cockroaches. And that is just, to me, is unacceptable. Or mold in their apartments that affects their health. So I think there has to be some kind of like enforcement and also education. Even though when you rent an apartment, they make you sign a document, something about mold, that you will let them know if there is mold in the apartment complex or if they see signs of it. But then they don't resolve the problem. They just want to go clean with bleach and say, there you go, it's clean. So I think doing emphasis on that will be awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriella. And Justin?
Justin Wood, kind of piggybacking off what Gabriella stated. It sounds like this is already in here, but when we're talking about, evaluating, population reduction for arthropod species, just keeping in mind some of the comments we previously heard about pesticides and assuming that using integrated pest management systems are those using pesticides or not, just a little more clarity around that.
Okay, thank you. And let's go to Jessica and then Dawn.
Jessica Brown. I was just noticing some of the policies have asterisks after them, and some of them don't. I didn't know what the asterisk meant in the goals.
Yes, sorry, I meant to remove all of those, but I guess I missed a couple. Those just refer to goals that are either existing in or very similar to goals that appear in the comprehensive plan.
Okay, so even though some of them say comprehensive plan, but some have they say other things. So they're in the comprehensive plan and they may be found someplace else also.
Yes, sorry for the confusion. Yeah, the asterisk is a goal that came from the comprehensive plan. The source of policy language in this table is where the policy language might have come from.
Okay. And then the maintain and enhance the region's air quality. It's just so vague, whereas everything else kind of has something specific. So
This is Don Steinke. When it comes to climate change and the resilience to climate change under the category of health, first thing that comes to my mind is heat, means air conditioning. And the second thing is air purifiers when we have smoke. Those would impact health. There were more people that died in the heat dome event. I used to think people would move to Oregon or British Columbia, but more people died in the heat dome event in British Columbia than died at any place else. So moving north isn't the solution. But anyway, air purifiers and air conditioning seem to come to mind most readily. And just one advantage of having old people here, we have historical memory. Back in 2011, Clark County Public Health Department did a 200-page document called Growing Healthy Communities. And it seems like the health department should be part of this group. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Don. All right, let's move into transportation.
Yes. Okay, sorry, I keep getting a pop-up every time I turn on the mic. So first goal is to develop a multimodal transportation system, which we mentioned earlier, with options for individuals with varying degrees of mobility. That second point is something that specifically came up in the last EJC meeting. And so two policies that go along with that potentially are, number one, improve street connectivity and walkability. So there we're talking about pedestrian routes, which could also serve the secondary function as being evacuation routes in an emergency, and also supporting bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, which is currently covered in the Clark County Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan. Second policy is that the county shall support new and improved passenger rail transportation services. So I know we've certainly heard a lot about rail from some folks in these groups, and so this is just one policy that addresses that and thinking about how to increase rail capacity locally. And then the second goal is ensure resilience throughout the transportation system. So just generally speaking, if we're talking about our roads and bridges, evacuation routes, different types of multimodal transportation, really thinking about how to plan for a local transportation system that can withstand the projected climate impacts that we are foreseeing and also can recover quickly from those events if there is damage or disruption.
All right, we'll open it up. And I just want to make a note that we might not get through we have 3 left after transportation, 3 sectors. We'll see if we can get through all of them, but if not, then there'll just be more opportunity for written comments. But I'll open it up to Dave. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Dave Rowe. You have, for transportation, you need to add electric locomotives and passenger, because we got diesel locomotives that are idling over Vancouver for hours, and they have to do that to keep their air pressure up. So that's why they have to do it. But they should have electric diesel, or not electric overhead wires that would keep the transportation system that would be cleaner than diesel-powered locomotives. And this would include in passenger rail. There should be electric-powered passenger rail cars.
All right, thank you, Dave. And let's go to Monica.
Yes, agreeing with the last comments. And then also, if we want people to change, essentially, we need to help people to do that. And so over in Portland, they have those scooters that we could implement over here that people can, just use a card and get around, and maybe have a little like cart to like put their stuff in, but then also have it to where people who have a difficult time affording that to have a card, like kind of like a prepaid card, so they could get some of the cost paid for. And then also, I put in the comments before of the making the bike that you own now into an electric bike by this little device that goes onto the back wheel and makes it into an electric bike. And so, saying, hey, we're going to help you out with the upfront cost rebate to go purchase it at the site, or, so it's not just giving money out. It's also, you have to purchase it here in order to get it. So then we need more people to have those kind of modes of transportation. So more people see that, and we need to be facilitating and helping people get those things. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica. Let's go to Don and then Noel.
This is Don Steinke, and I don't see transit mentioned there, and that seems like it should be. And Monica mentioned e-bikes as a upgrade from an existing bike, but Colorado and Southern California has a lot of incentives for new electric bikes, and apparently the program is quite popular. And an e-bike would provide resilience, wouldn't it? Thank you.
Noelle Lovern. I'm excited about the policy to, expand or complete the, bicycle, the multimodal transportation pathways. I lived in Boise, Idaho for some time, and we had a great multimodal commuter way that was like 36 miles, and you never crossed traffic. It really does encourage people to use all of the things we're talking about. If you don't have a good pathway to do it on, it's very difficult. I did just get my bike fixed and realized how spotty our trails are around here. There's no real connectivity to get where you want to go safely.
So excited about that.
Great, thank you. And back to Dave.
This is Dave Rowe again, just talking about transit connectivity. I just went to Portland the other day on a C-Tran, and I wanted to go to Union Station. None of their information told me where Union Station was. You get off 6 in Everett, and it's a 4-block walk, but there's nothing in C-Tran published documents that say that. And I also looked at TriMet, and they also don't mention Union Station, Amtrak Station. So I think we have a disconnect in our transit system that should be corrected.
All right, thanks, Dave. Let's move into the next sector, waste management.
Yes, just one really comprehensive goal here, which is promote waste reduction, composting, and recycling. But we have 3 proposed policies that reflect ways that the county might go about that. So first is about sustaining a business technical assistance program to increase recycling and reduce waste. So that is, as written here, at least is specific to the business sector, but also exploring novel strategies to reuse organic waste for compost, energy, and other practical purposes. Second proposed policy is about creating a surcharge for pollution, including air pollutants, water pollutants, wastewater, solid waste. And third proposed policy is to develop capacity and programs to remove and, if applicable, compost large vegetative debris and other solid waste that ends up out in the environment on roadways and so forth in the aftermath of a storm or severe weather event.
All right, we'll open up for comments on these goals and policies, or goal and policies. Yeah, Brent?
Brent Marsden, just a quick comment. I see the develop a local pollution surcharge, and in all the research I've done, it seems that the one effective way to get anything done is to charge people money when they don't have the optimal processes. So that gets people attention. If you're just going to ask for cooperation, overall, you're really not going to get it. But if people have to pay, that gets their attention. And then that money can also be used to pay for programs.
All right, thanks, Brent. I'll go to Nick and then Justin.
I'll disagree a little bit. Solid waste is also, they take tree stumps and organic waste that's going to, or any of that recyclable that are going to, like our facility that we grind up to reuse again. So I don't think we want a surcharge on that kind of stuff because it was just going to make it, that we'll leave it out to rot instead of, it would be too expensive to bring to, up to the mills to use. So that's what my comment is on that.
All right, and Justin?
Thank you, Justin Wood here. Wanted to kind of point out here, explore novel strategies to reuse organic waste for compost, energy, or other practical purposes. I've heard some concerns of, people in my circle who live in the city of Portland, Oregon, and their use of the compost bins there, and maybe some concerns around health and well-being, kind of something that we just talked about in regards to rodent populations, et cetera. So maybe having that novel strategy be, a communal compost or something like that, just something to think about.
All right, and Don?
Producer responsibility. I've heard that in Germany, the producer of the materials is responsible for its end of life, and it's reduced amount of waste in garbage cans by 80%. That person that told me this lives in Clark County now. He was stationed there for many years in Germany.
All right, thanks, Dawn. And Monica.
This is one of the comments that I sent in, but it's for waste and everything and recycling. I believe that there needs to be an education piece done to the community by door-to-door knocking, by sending out something in the mail. Preferably, I don't know. For me, I look at postcards more than I look at something that I have to open up in all these flyers. But it's saying, hey, we are going to change our recycling ways, and this is the proper way. But that and you'll get a chance to do it right, the first time. If you don't, then we're gonna, give you a warning. If you don't again, we're gonna give you another warning. If you don't again, we're gonna come out to you and we're gonna teach you how to do it properly. Because there's many different things to recycle. That over at the Unitarian Universalist Church, they have places where you can do your recycling of where you check on your recycling thing, and if it has like a triangle with the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you can take it there and they can recycle it for you. There's also like your plastic forks and spoons and what is it called, straws. There's also styrofoam that I just heard got outlawed in Washington, which is great, but there's so many different things that need to be recycled differently and in different places. But if they don't learn, if after someone coming out and teaching them, and they still continue to do the same thing, then that's when they get charged. That's when it's like, okay, well, now you're going to get charged for this, or we're going to remove we're going to take away your privileges of, having services come out and take your recycling and your waste until you can show us that you can actually do this correctly. But not like, right away taking it away from them, being like, no, let's give you, we want to help you. Like, tell us how we can help you in this, but we still don't want to let it go like, okay, well, you're not listening to us. It's fine. Like, we need to hold people accountable for polluting and not recycling correctly. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Monica and Nick, and then we'll go to Gabriella.
Just real quick, I did some work for Waste Management a few years ago, and I don't know if anybody heard about busting open bags, but that's what they do at the secondary site. Washington and Oregon are very high already in recycling things compared to states like Texas. We have over 95% of our recycle go to the recycling on these busted bags. Down there in Texas, it's a 5% or 10%. So I understand what Monica's saying, but at the same time, we are already doing this stuff in Washington and Oregon already to increase recyclables. So I want to give credit where credit's due for people that are already doing the right thing for recyclables. Second thing they can do, I live where we only get one garbage can, and there's areas around that they have a recycle bin that we could throw our recycles in. So if they allow us that to recycle our garbages, have it split up. We used to have 2 garbages in our house, one for recycle and one for garbage cans, for garbage, but now they've removed my recycling. I can no longer do it anymore, so it's hard to do that. So there's something that I think the UTC can do with our garbage hauling or something, that they could make it mandatory for recycling. I think that's a really low-hanging fruit to do that. And Monica, I just don't know how we're going to go after people that aren't recycling once when we get stuff stolen all the time and the cops won't respond. So I don't know if that's very feasible to do. I think it's a grandiose goal, but we need to increase our police presence for other crimes too. And that's what I say about that.
All right, thanks, Nick. And Gabriella?
Yes, thank you. I agree with Nick. So a lot of the recycling is happening. Maybe there is a population that doesn't do it, so the education will help for that. And maybe one thing that can be encouraged in this waste management is for people to use, if they're going to use disposable forks and spoons and things like that, there are already some companies that are creating those products that are recyclable. They are made out of recyclable products, or that they dissolve in the earth when they are tossed away. So the more that those things get produce, the cheaper they are. And so probably having something like that, and encourage people to use those utensils instead of the hard plastic that need to be recycled, that might be another way to manage the pollution with utensils and things like that. Thank you. And I
Right,
do
thank
understand
you.
what Monica says, sorry, about the, sorry, yes, echo. About the recyclables. So it is easier to track that with homeowners, but not when you live in an apartment complex. I just want to say that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Gabriela. And I want to respect where we are in the agenda and with time. I think we might want to not go to the next two sectors and leave those for public comment, for your written comments afterwards so that we can get to public comment. That work for folks? What's that? Yeah. If you look at the table that you have on the written sheets in front of you or printed sheets in front of you, or if you're online at the table at the end, you'll see that there are goals and policies for water management and for zoning and development. So maybe as you develop your written comments, just really focus on those two, or focus on all of them, but just reminder that we didn't get to those in the meeting. So please review those to make sure that if you have any comments on water management and zoning and development. So thank you everyone for those great comments, and especially, like Dawn said, this is the first time that you're seeing these, so I know it was a lot to see it all and kind of absorb it all and then be asked to provide your comments on it all at once, but this was really a lot of great input, so really appreciate it all. I will turn it over to Dana on next steps on this piece, and then we'll have time for public comment.
Okay. Yeah, just quickly here. So yes, we absolutely invite you all to take some time with what's in this document and develop more thoughts and feedback. If you have anything that you'd like to add that we didn't get to today, please feel free to email any suggestions to Jenna. We're asking for that feedback by the 29th, so a week from today, so that we have time to prepare that and take it to the next EJC meeting, which is the next step for us, is to take what we hear today, incorporate it into our materials, and then take it to the EJC for our next round of review. As we mentioned before, the consultant team will be sharing out a goal and policy comment tracker, and that will show your very specific detailed comments that you've provided. I do apologize that that wasn't available for today, but we'll have that for you soon, and you can refer to that if you're curious how your specific comments are tied into any of these goals and policies. And at the next CAG meeting, we'll plan to just continue this discussion about goals and policies and the results of a pre-meeting survey, which we didn't actually mention yet, but there will be a pre-meeting survey.
Yes, so look out for that. We're still thinking about what that pre-meeting survey will look like, but our hope is that that the team would be able to develop updated goals and policies based on all of the comments that you provided today and by writing by the 29th, and kind of revise the goals and policies, and that we would be able to send those back out to you with a survey to kind of get your initial thoughts before our next meeting, so that we can kind of have an efficient conversation there. But TBD on exactly what that's going to look like. It may depend a lot on kind of the comments that come in over the next week. All right. Any questions on those next steps? All right. Then let's move into public comment. Go to the next slide. I'm going to ask folks on the line, I think we just have a couple of members of the public here. So if you're looking to make a comment, please go ahead and raise your hand, or if you're joined by phone, press *9. I don't see anyone raising their hand, so we may not have public comment today. We'll just give it 10 more seconds in case someone wants to make a comment. All right. Well, thank you. Members of the public, if you do have any comments you want to provide in writing, you can send those to the email address that's on the screen, comp.plan@clark.wa.gov. All right, let's move into the next slide then. We'll just kind of go over some of our next steps. All right, so like Dana just said, we ask that you kind of email your goal and policy suggestions to Jenna by Wednesday, May 29th, and really use that spreadsheet as your basis for developing your comments and edits, and just look out for that pre-meeting survey before our next meeting. A couple of other things that are not on this slide. Some of you mentioned earlier that you had comments on the CAG number 3 meeting summary. So if you have anything in writing you want to provide, that's just helpful. So would appreciate getting that within the next week so we can look to finalize the CAG number 3 meeting summary. And also, as Jenna explained earlier, we are hoping that we can get as many people as possible to come to the June Community Advisory Group meeting in person. So would encourage folks to try to plan to do that, or let us know if there's anything we can help so that you can make it in person, but we understand, of course, if you're not able to. And I think that that is it for next steps. Do we have another slide? Next CAG meeting is on June 26th, and at that one, really, the main topic is going to be continuing the discussion on the goals and policies for the resilience sub-element. And I see a hand up from Anne. Go ahead, Anne.
Quick question, Sylvia. So all the materials that we saw today, they're on this web page here. The slides.
Yeah.
So if we want to make comments on, if we want to make comments on the goals and policies, for example, it's all on the web. You're not sending anything out to us, right?
Yes, everything is posted on that web. Everything's posted on that web page. The slides are not yet posted, but those will be posted tomorrow. But what's on the slide is a repeat. What's on the slides is really just a repeat of what's in the kind of giant table, the 4-page table that you got with the goals and policies.
Right. Okay, so we just stick with that web page. Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. All right, any other questions or thoughts? Okay, I'll turn it over to Jenna for any closing thoughts.
Sorry, I had one.
Thank you all.
It was Monica.
Was that Monica? Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. 1 second. I had it written down, and yeah, I wanted to show Rufio too, because I wanted everyone to see that we must act as if we answer to and only answer to our ancestors, our children, and the unborn. And I just want to, have that, in our hearts, that why we're here. And it's for, all of us and our kiddos and future generations. Is my baby looking at educational. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Well, this is Jenna. I just wanted to thank you all again for the late meeting, 3-hour-long meetings on the middle of the week. We know they're hard. We do hear you on the process piece. We have been struggling ourselves to be able to turn things in time for these meetings, so we will try to do better and get things out ahead of time. And I'll just reiterate, there's going to be 2 chances to review materials before the next meeting so that we can really come into the next meeting and dig into those topics you want to dig into more. So any additional feedback after today based on what we did just present to you, a huge table, please send in the next week. And then we will have another survey, which we're hoping can help us figure out what to focus on so we don't have to go through every single policy at the next meeting, right? We can have a more strategic conversation on the things where there's more discussion to be had. So we do hear you, and we'll work on that. So yeah, please give your feedback, and I'll just also reiterate, anything on that list can go, right? Anything on that list can change. It is a starting point, just to have something to talk off of, but it is still totally up for being something different. So just want to make sure we're saying that. So yeah, otherwise, just thank you again and hope you all have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, bye.
Yeah, bye.